Today we begin year 2 of the narrative lectionary. From September through next May, we'll be moving through the Bible to hear God's saving acts throughout history. Moving through the Hebrew Bible, first the Old Testament, to see God choosing the Israelites and blessing them so that they can be a blessing to the rest of the world. We'll wait with the prophets, call out for a Savior. Jesus will come, we'll follow his ministry. Jesus will die, be resurrected, ascend into heaven, and then we'll follow the prophets through the end of the year. It'll be fun. Last year, on the first Sunday, we started with Noah's Ark. That story's kind of a downer. But the need for grace or a good word is clear. And as I was looking at our story today, I thought that perhaps the narrative lectionary was beginning too far back today. Because our story in Genesis 2, what we read today, what Julie read today, precedes the fall. Sin has not yet entered into the world. And if there is no sin in the world, do you need to preach a sermon? Are there sermons in heaven or in paradise where there's no brokenness? So I wondered what to do with this Genesis 2 text when two people are together and naked and unashamed and it is paradise. It made me think of a conversation I had with a friend last fall. He and I were driving through some nice neighborhoods, and we were looking at some great big homes on great big hills overlooking a great big lake. And my friend and I were talking about church because it's what we always talk about. And he's a deeply religious man, but he pointed at one of these homes and perhaps in jest to explain the state of the church, why no one goes to church except all of you. My friend pointed at one of these homes and said, "Why do people need church anyway?" And I thought it was kind of a good point. Modern life can be so air-conditioned and comfortable that there is not the sort of acquaintance with sorrow and deprivation that makes God and grace absolute commodities. One can learn the ultimate truth through sorrow and deprivation. And that ultimate truth is that no one can save themselves. But it's hard to learn that if the world is pushing you to pretend otherwise, to act as if everything is good, to act as if you are in control of everything. It might be hard to find grace when you're in the midst of paradise. And this was the problem with Genesis 2, I thought. Trying to prepare a sermon on this text was a little bit like driving through the gates of one of those homes with my friend. The gate magically opened for some reason. I got out of the car, knocked on the door, and a woman answers. She's not wearing shoes or socks or pants. All she has on is a man's oversized dress shirt with one button fastened in the middle. Whomever she took it off of must be a very big man. And I'm standing there, and I say, "Would you like to hear a good word from the Lord?" This is my job. This church needs to grow. We need money to pay for staff and building improvements and to spread the gospel. So I ask her this, and she looks at me with a little confusion. She's got a great big latte, and she takes a sip of it, and she runs her fingers through her beautiful hair and turns her shoulders to the inside of her beautiful contemporary open home. "Adam!" And a man appears next to her. He's not wearing a shirt. Do these people have no shame? He must be 6'5", fills up the whole door frame. Looks like he just walked off the set of the latest Marvel film. "Hello," I say. "Would you like to hear a good word, a word from the Lord?" And Adam looks at me, and he puts his hand on the small of Eve's back, making sure that I can see that it is his hand on Eve's back and not mine, and I can see. Adam looks out at his yard, at his home. He's looking at me as if to say, "Look at what we have. You're trying to give us something?" And I can feel this isn't working. So Adam reaches into the pocket of his flannel pants and pulls out a $100 bill. "Listen, we're not interested in whatever coupon book you're selling. Why don't you just go get a hamburger or something?" And I think this is a good idea, so I turn around and I don't ask to take their picture, but I want to take their picture. So before sin entered the world, was preaching necessary? Do we need a word from God in paradise? The creation account that we read today is the second creation account. The first one is in Genesis 1. And if I had been a better LCMS parochial student, I would know all these days. Maybe Uncle Frank or Aunt Janice or David do. But I have to read them here. Day 1, darkness and light. Day 2, waters and sky. Day 3, earth, seas, vegetation. Day 4, sun and stars. Day 5, sea creatures. Day 6, land animals and humans. Day 7, rest. Maybe you don't have that memorized, but do you know what God says after each day? 3 words. It was good. Of course it was good. There was no sin. It was paradise. It was so good back then. We've been saying that since the beginning of time. It was so good back then. But was it good? Did you catch what Julie read in verse 18? In this utopian text, God says, it is not good. Something before the fall, something before sin has entered the world is not good. How can this be? In the midst of paradise, something is not good. It is like God is standing on the doorstep of wherever I am and has the audacity to shove Chris Hemsworth aside and point around at the house, point at that couple and say, this is not good. That's what this creation story says. Genesis 2 asks for preaching because God says it is not good that man should be alone. I'll make him a helper as his partner. So God tries to get some pets for his son. Tries out every pet at the store, birds, cattle, every living creature. Not even man's best friend is a good enough partner for Adam, and it wasn't good. So then God finally creates a true friend for Adam, a true friend, and the two cling together. They become one flesh, and they are naked and unashamed. What a feeling. Maybe you know what that's like. And things are good, but they're not good for long. Because if we kept reading this story, we would come to the fall. And the fall seems like it's a story that is dependent upon multiple actors, Adam and Eve. When I was growing up, my 5 older brothers and sisters were so much older than me that I was basically an only child for all intents and purposes. 300 East 1st Street in Waconia, Minnesota was my Garden of Eden. I had total control. I was without a peer. I could sit anywhere. I could always have the remote. I could have the rest of the food. It was the easiest existence imaginable. 305 Campbell Drive is not like that today. 3 little creatures are fighting and scratching and clawing and competing for more, seeing who can be the loudest, the toughest, the strongest. Holly and I are supposed to be the caretakers of this garden, but we look at one another and say, what is going on? We have no experience with this. Sometimes to Holly and me, it seems as if sinfulness may just be a product of overcrowding. Maybe if Adam had remained an only child, there would have been no wars, no pain, no morality. Maybe if Adam had remained God's only child forever, everything would have been okay. But everything isn't okay, and you all know that, whether or not you've read this story before. You know that everything isn't okay. I saw that couple that I saw in the big house at the grocery store. His jaw was clenched, and he was speaking to her in a soft voice, and she wasn't looking at him. She was just picking apples, and she was putting the apples in bags, and then she walked away, and he chased after her, and they went out to their Tesla, and they drove home, and they didn't talk. They just went to bed. Everything is not good. The only story that we tell about Adam and Eve is the one where everything falls apart. It's the story of original sin. It explains why things are not good in each of our own homes. And we can trace it all back to Adam and Eve. That's when it started. Original sin at the very beginning. Every hardship or distress, link it back to them. It's because of them. It's an origin story. Adam and Eve are a problem unto themselves, and we are a problem unto ourselves. Everything started good. The first dates, easy. Moving in, painless. The wedding, fun. The honeymoon, even better. But now, the sink is piled with dirty dishes. The mortgage is way too big and it's due next month. The adult son never calls home. And Adam has a new mole on his back that he needs to get checked out. Adam and Eve are all grown up and worried, like us. So, if there was a knock on their house this day, would they answer? I think they'd answer because they've tried everything. Counseling didn't work. Neither did the vacation to Portugal. They tried going to church. They joined a couples group, but that didn't work either. Everybody in the couple was always praying together and hugging and kissing, and this was not Adam and Eve's thing. So the knock comes on the door, and they're going to answer it because they've tried everything, and ever since they have left the garden, life has been so hard. They answer the door, and she is standing there, a prophet sent from God. And she says, would you like to hear a good word? A word from the Lord. And Adam and Eve would very much like to hear a good word from the Lord. And the prophet says, do you remember what life was like before you had each other? You were alone. All you had was your work, your exercise, your dog, your paltry self-assessment. You were alone. And then you found each other, and you were a little less alone. I did not bring you together in order for you to proclaim some original state that never was. I brought you together so that you could be a little less lonely, to quench that original loneliness that is inside each and every one of us, that loneliness that was in the beginning. So I don't think the need for a good word arose the first time teeth ripped through the flesh of that forbidden fruit. I think the need for a good word from the Lord arose further back still, when God realized that no one, not me, not you, not even God, could make it all alone. Thank God that we are not alone, never, ever, ever alone. Amen.